House in session. We are on order number 14 and 7, cognitive debate. Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise to support the two bills before the House, which speak to debt restructuring and the attendant matters. I just want to join the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central to paint a picture of what we found when we came to government on the 25th of May 2018. What we found, and I want to reinforce this because the feeling that we were surprised by what we found, I don't want to use the same term, but is unfounded. We were not surprised because, as the Honourable Member read from the manifesto, we knew that our country's debt was hanging us. We knew, and this party in opposition had spoken for a long time, loudly, about the need to restructure the debt. It fell on deaf ears of the then government. I've come to realize afterward that it might not have been deaf ears as much as it was brains that could not understand what needed to be done to manage the affairs of a small country. And I'm really happy that people like that were not put to run the affairs of larger countries. The disaster would have been much more severe. But we've been having downgrades. I mean, all these things are now the stuff of legend. And the history books will no doubt record that period between 2008 and early 2018 as maybe one of the darkest periods as it relates to fiscal management in this country. And I specified fiscal management because we've had many dark days because we have a history of slavery and oppression from colonial powers. But as it relates to the post-slavery period and our own management of our financial affairs, those 10 years will go down as a time when the central bank was printing money, all the rating agencies were constantly downgrading us, our reserves were falling, we were building up arrears, taking goods and services from businesses, refusing to pay them. It was a financing of government that was adversarial. We were holding people, as it were, hostage, taking their goods and services, refusing to pay them, reaching 157% in terms of our debt to GDP ratio, not including any arrears. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is the situation within which we found ourselves on assuming office last May. We were sworn in on the Sunday. We met with the social partnership on Monday morning at 10 o'clock. And we established from the beginning that the situation we found was not one that could be addressed successfully by government alone, even a government with a resounding mandate, even a government where 3 out of every 4 persons, I believe, voted for this party as we came into office. Even with that mandate, that 30-0 mandate, we could not do what needed to be done to rescue this country. And so right at the beginning of our tenure, we embraced the social partnership. We indicated to them that this was the situation. And the thing is, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Barbadians are intelligent. And I say that in spite of the last administration, because I'm making a general statement. I'm not speaking about specific people. Barbadians generally are intelligent people. And so the social partners, just like the ordinary people of Barbados, recognized that we were in a situation that would call for heavy lifting. They also understood that as a caring government, because much of our mantra coming into office was that we cared, and we continue to care about people. And so as we worked with our social partners, the understanding was very early that we would not act as the previous Democratic Labour Party administration had, both in, 2 administrations, both in 2013 and in the 1991 to 92 period. We would not place the entire burden of the adjustment that was needed, the adjustment that Barbadians recognized as needed to be done, needed to be made. We would not place the burden of the adjustment on the ordinary people of Barbados. And we established with our social partners that any adjustment needed to be a shared adjustment. All of us had a role to play in making sure that the fortunes of Barbados were restored, and that in the future we could go forward looking and visualizing and visioning an improved situation, a rescuing, as we termed it, a stemming of the hemorrhaging, of the bleeding, and a restoration of the fortunes. And beyond restoration, a transformation of our economy, a transformation of our society, a transformation of our entire country. And we got from the social partnership a consensus. And the social partnership, Mr. Deputy Speaker, continues to be integral to the success of the economic program of this country. The BERT Monitoring Committee, and there are some people who, in serious matters that relate to the affairs of the country and the affairs of the people of this country, like to use terms like a fella named Bert. And that level of triviality used to worry me, but it no longer does, because you realize that there are those who will go to any level, and I'm talking about going down to any level, to score cheap points. But the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan has in place a monitoring committee made up of our social partners. And that committee, independent of government, independent of the central bank, gets its information, analyzes the information, and goes to the public directly, without reference to Ministry of Finance, Prime Minister. They go to the country directly with their assessment of where Barbados is at. I also want to repeat, I think I've said it before in another place, that we have in our approach to governance, especially the governance and the management of our fiscal affairs, of our financial affairs, we have recognized the value of the people's organization. And I refer, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to the credit union movement. And I want to share with the Honorable Chamber, or repeat maybe, that the social partnership is now comprised of government, workers' organizations, private sector, and the credit union movement. They are now full members of the social partnership in their own right, not to be invited on occasion, but they are fully a part of our social partnership.
Very good.
They are the people's organization, and that is a reflection of how this government sees the role of ordinary people and their representative organizations in shaping the fiscal policy, in shaping the economic development, in shaping the country's development at this stage in our history. One of the things that has really warmed my heart in our approach to the management of an economic catastrophe, and I almost rose on a point of order when the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central was talking about the path of the Democratic Labour Party government, because there is no such thing as a path when you're in free fall. And I know he went to a different institution to the one that I went to, but I thought that he would have learned that where he went. We were in free fall. I think he understood it, but didn't know how to phrase it. He talked about hanging off the edge of a cliff. There was no path in the 10 years of the Democratic Labour Party government. They were not following anything. A path suggests the following of something. The country was in free fall. And I want to contrast that free fall to the approach of this government. We decided, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central so eloquently articulated earlier, that the paying of the debt that was due, principal and interest, in the first few months of our administration would have placed the country at serious risk. And the way I like to put it, so that people like me can understand, is that if the government, if Barbados had paid all the debt, principal and interest, that was due between June and November, the store owners of Barbados would not have had any money, any foreign reserves, to purchase stock for Christmas. And so all those people who bought gifts for their children, who bought, I think I'll have to say hams, I don't really enjoy saying it, the imported ones, who bought curtains, who may have changed out some of their furniture and appliances, would have found, if we had made those debt payments, that the stores in Bridgetown and in other places did not have those things that Barbadians have become accustomed to seeing in stores at Christmas time. That was the situation that we faced. And we made, as a government, a very bold decision. And we don't sugarcoat it. We defaulted. So when either Eni or Mini or whatever names I think I heard recently speak to Barbados defaulting as though it is something that they discovered, we made a decision not to service our debt. Not because we woke up and went into panic, but because we are a government that understands how to manage the affairs of the country in an orderly way. So that when the social partners stood together in Lloyd Erskine Sandifer Center and took a photograph while the Prime Minister, the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, was speaking and making the announcement to the world that we would not be servicing our debt, Just a few hours afterward, the head of the International Monetary Fund, the then head of the International Monetary Fund, Madame Lagarde, issued a statement on the IMF's website indicating that organization's support for Barbados and support for the direction we were heading in. She, Mr. Deputy Speaker, understood that our approach was a reasoned approach, an orderly approach, an approach which indicated to her organization, and to the world that we knew what needed to be done, and we were prepared to make the hard decisions to get us from where we were to where we ought to be. And we understood that that default would have triggered an immediate downgrade. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is like understanding that you have an illness and you have to drink Buckley's, which will burn your throat, but will help you to get rid of the cold. Or you will have to use some cod liver oil or shark oil that could possibly make you throw up, but it will help you down the road. We, as a government, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are not afraid to make the hard decisions because we understand what we have to do, we know where we have to go, and we are committed to traveling that road because we are invested in the rescuing, rebuilding, and transformation of this country. What, though, does the debt restructuring mean? We unfortunately, and I say this always with a heavy heart, we have had to separate about maybe between 1,000 and 1,100 persons from employment in the public service. And that has not been an easy decision. And even though I will say that it is much less than the 5,000 that the advisors to the last government wanted us to terminate, I don't think that even contextualizing it that way is fully appropriate. Because every person who goes home is a person who will have, or almost every person, is a person who will have a challenge providing for themselves, providing for their families, providing for any other dependents that they may have. And so I do not want to say that we did anything good. We did what was necessary, but we recognize that it caused pain. But I want to say to the people of Barbados, through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that there were those who were saying to us loudly and vociferously that we should send home 5,000 people. I know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, one of the really galling things about that piece of advice is that one of its chief proponents will be receiving fees based on the arrangement and agreement that we have had with the creditor committee. It galls me that a person or that people could make those kinds of pronouncements and then almost while doing that or immediately after doing that receive fees from having advised or offering advice to those with whom we were negotiating. But we understand that people matter. And so, with the agreement of the social partners that the adjustment and the burden of the adjustment would have to be shared, we made sure that the minimum number of jobs were lost. The minimum number of people lost their employment with the public sector. And we did that even before reaching agreement with our creditors, because we were determined that, as they say, come hell or high water, there was a number that we would not go beyond. And so whatever other adjustment needed to be done had to be shared by others. Those others including the creditors, those who had lent money to this country. The adjustment, the restructuring of the debt meant, therefore, that a limited number of persons lost their jobs. The restructuring of the debt meant that any revenue-raising measures then could be limited. And we, again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as an open and transparent government, we understand that we have had to raise some revenue, and that raising of revenue has caused some hardship. We recognize that. And so we were measured in our approach to revenue raising as well, because we believe that the bulk of the adjustment would have to come by way of our debt, both the debt stock and the debt servicing. As a country, the Honourable Member for Christchurch Central spoke to the fact that we came into a situation where the people before, I'm not sure, I'm always confused if I'm still supposed to say former honourable members, but I believe words mean something, and I don't want to dilute the meaning of honourable. But those who preceded us left us with very little in terms of fiscal space. And so the honourable member for Christchurch East had to spend days and nights inhaling the pungent smell of sewage leading from the front to deal with the situation that was left by the last government. But they also left a situation where there were very limited funds to deal with the situation. And his management and the management of the government also indicates that there are lots of things that can be done on limited budgets. But as you know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, your generation and the generations before you understood how to manage with limited budgets. I am pleased to say to the people of Barbados that while in the 10 years of the DLP government, they thought that those techniques of yesteryear were gone, we in our management have indicated and have demonstrated that you can still manage an economy even with limited fiscal space, with limited amounts of money around to do what needs to be done. And that debt restructuring, it means that debt holders take a haircut, and that is what debt restructuring often includes. But I want to join my colleague as it relates to the assertion, or really maybe a slur, in terms of the national insurance scheme. Because I, Mr. Deputy Speaker, was a member of the board of the national insurance scheme for a number of years. And I will say to you that my understanding of the scheme, its liquidity, the actuarial reviews, tell me that the national insurance scheme is at lower risk now, having taken a haircut, than it was while I was on the board in a Democratic Labour Party administration. And I say that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because economic activity, the ability of a pension fund to finance obligations in the future depends on a certain level of certainty. A haircut is not in and of itself a bad thing. My judgment and I say my judgment because it is my personal judgment, is that the uncertainty of all the paper, we call it paper because there were the instruments, treasury bills, debentures, all kinds of stuff that the last government forced the national insurance scheme to take, knowing full well that it was all rated as junk. In other words, nobody had any confidence that that paper could be paid, could be exchanged for cash when the national insurance scheme needed it. I am saying to this Honorable Chamber, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the national insurance scheme is now in a position and is continuing to get to a position where they will know for sure what they are going to receive by way of cash when they redeem whatever debt is owed to the scheme by the government of Barbados. Those matters are now certain, and the scheme and its actuaries are in a much better position than they were when we came into office. There are certain, and actuarial reviews and pension plan projections depend on that certainty. We've also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, been able in the restructuring of the debt, we have been able to reduce the interest rate by 50%. I am advised, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that in cases, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central would have indicated, in some cases where interest rates were 13%, there will now be 6.5%, is what I've been informed. In cases where interest rates were between 7 and 8%, those rates will now be reduced to between 3 and 4%. That is the kind of saving that those who advise and work with and for this government have been able to achieve. And I really want to join the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central in saying a big thank you to the team. The team in the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment, including Ambassador Maskell, including Professor Prasad, and a big thank you to White Oak. And you know, on the matter of White Oak, I have been doing some thinking, and I imagined a conversation with my late father. And I, Mr. Deputy Speaker, imagined myself saying to my father, Daddy, if you give me $45, I will be able to give you $10,000. Now, if I said that to him, the sensible man that he is, he would have asked me, what kind of Ponzi scheme is that? He may have even asked me if I was going to be investing in Clico. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, those numbers that I just shared, $45 to $10,000, represents the investment that this government undertook to make and that this country has made in engaging White Oak to lead us in our debt negotiations. $45 cost to get $10,000 in return. Mr. Deputy Speaker, not even in the parables was the return so great. The servant that got 5 talents doubled it, 100%. This type of investment, in my mind, demonstrates the capacity of this government to make good decisions on behalf of its people, on behalf of the country. And so I always think, because sometimes it is easy to attempt to score political points by using the absolute number of an amount that is paid. But I always remember that as a boy, I heard the statement, and in those boy days, when he was running around at KFL with the honorable member for St. James Central, I can't normally debate without calling his name. I heard, I may have heard it from him, he may be quoting somebody, that there are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics. Benjamin Disraeli,
I've heard
he's
that.
advising me, made that statement. But I want to say, because I believe that these kinds of debates, these kinds of interventions, are teaching moments and learning moments for all of us, those of us in this honorable chamber and those who may be in the outside in the public. To take a number out of context is to do a disservice. And that is the reason why I say $45 spent to get a saving of $10,000. And I think Barbadians need to understand what it is that this government has done in its name and what it has achieved by making the investment, spending the money. Lest somebody says that I use the word investment to mislead people. We spent money to save money. And we spent a little bit of money, when you look at the broader context, to save a ton of money. Those are the terms that St. Peter understands.
Right.
We spend a little bit to get enough. That is how this government operates. We understand relationships between numbers, and we know where we are going. And so the word path, for the honorable member for Christchurch Central, path is really what the Barbados Labour Party does, as opposed to free fall. And to do all that has been done in 17 months, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is nothing short of phenomenal. Phenomenal. Phenomenal in a situation where creditors, as we expect, would not be happy in terms of the direction we were going. And we understood that. And so we never took an adversarial approach, even though we took a firm and measured approach. But even facing creditors who do not agree with the direction in which we are going, to conclude in 17 months, I think, Mr. Speaker, when the history is written, it will be recorded that this government has really done a service to the nation. And that service is what the people elected us to do. They repose significant confidence in us, and they've expected that we would deliver. Now, I'm going to cut this a bit short, because I think the people get it, because I have, and I've always had, confidence in the people of this country. The country has educated its citizens, and our citizens get it. So that remarks about too many people in a cabinet and those kinds of things, anecdotal at best, not grounded in any empirical assessment, and so maybe just blowing into the ear. But the people understand that this bill, these two orders that we are debating today, are to lead to what we call a debt exchange, so that the debt instruments those documents that represent our obligations, what we owe to people, like a hire purchase agreement. It is a document. Those documents for the old debt will be exchanged for new documents. And by documents, I don't necessarily mean paper, but documents nonetheless. There will be that exchange so that our creditors will now have a new instrument, and for ordinary people, a new hire purchase agreement with terms that allow the Barbadian economy to breathe a little easier and allow us the ability to properly manage our debt servicing. And so we expect that once the process and all the processes are completed, that there will be a upgrade or maybe multiple upgrades of our debt based on the ratings agencies. We've already been told that as it relates to our domestic debt, we've already had the upgrade on that. And now as it relates to our foreign debt, the credit rating agencies and the market will recognize that this is a government that is serious. This is a country that is serious. This is a country and a government that is on the right path, and will then do the necessary upgrading to our ratings for foreign debt. Our approach to debt management, Mr. Deputy Speaker, speaks to order, as I said earlier, and for those who are interested in investing in a country, foreign direct investment or even local investment, those who are interested in investing always look for that level of certainty. And so with the restructuring now of, well, when it is complete, of the foreign debt to add to the restructuring of the local debt, confidence will continue to come back to this country. And I say continue, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because since we've come into office, and since investors recognize our positive, reasoned, and intelligent approach to the management of our affairs, the confidence has been coming back, and the investment has been coming back. But that will continue to grow because the confidence in our country, the confidence in the management of our fiscal affairs will engender the continuing confidence of investors. It will mean that investment will continue to come into our country. It also means that we will continue to reach those benchmarks that we set ourselves in the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, which was endorsed in the extended fund facility that we reach, that agreement that we reach with the International Monetary Fund.
May we have 2 minutes more?
I'm going to wrap up right now. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But I want to say to this chamber that I am not one who is about patting ourselves on our back. I am not about that because I recognize when I speak to people in Boscobel, in Indian Ground, in Black Bess, Six Mains, Spicesoma, and a quarter, wherever across St. Peter I speak to people, they say to me, they reinforce in my mind that what we are doing is what they have voted us in overwhelmingly to do. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when I was in St. Michael West just a few weeks ago, I also got that feedback. I got the feedback I got, and I didn't speak, so I'm going to be very clear. I didn't do a scientific sample, and I didn't speak to a large number of people. But those people with whom I spoke in St. Michael West gave me the assurance that they are happy with the approach of this government. They have said to me that they are feeling some of the pain, but that they understand that we are doing what needs to be done to rescue the country from the situation in which we found it just 17 months ago. And so I am heartened that the Barbadian electorate, the people of this country who I have all the time for because I am one of the people of this country, and where I understand where their brains are, where their hearts are. I am heartened by their understanding of the approach that this government is taking and their acceptance, even with their personal pain, their acceptance of the direction in which we are going. And I want to say to the people of this country that the job is not over. We are debating today the restructuring of the foreign debt. There is still a journey ahead of us. There are still many other milestones that we need to reach. This government pledges to Barbados that it will continue to take that measured, orderly, intelligent approach to managing the affairs of the country. And we expect that in the not too distant future, we will be able to restore the fortunes of Barbadians. And beyond that, we will continue that process that will lead to the transformation of our country. I'm obliged to you.
Thank you. Nice. Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. I rise to support this resolution brought by the member for Christchurch East Central as well. And, sir, like the member for St. Peter, in fact, oftentimes when the member for St. Peter speaks, I feel as if we've shared notes because we have very similar thoughts on these matters. But I feel as if this is also a teaching moment, and I mean for all of us, and indeed certainly for the country. I had the opportunity to manage an IMF program. In a former job, sir, I worked for another government, but in the region. And one of my projects, sir, was as lead on an IMF program. So indeed, the IMF actually would report to me at the end of the day to tell us how they were performing by the funds that they had received from the government. So I'm very familiar, sir, with IMF programs. I am very much aware of the state of the region, sir. I was also very much aware of the state in which Barbados had found itself. And in fact, sir, in several conversations, we were all amazed by the fact that despite the circumstances, it seems as if the persons who had the responsibility for leading this country at that time had shown very little care in managing our affairs. But I wish, sir, to share a few things about that program, only because I feel it sheds light on the overall circumstance in which we find ourselves. And I will tell you that for which I was responsible and what it taught me, and some of the lessons, sir, I believe would make sense for us going forward. I had a responsibility, sir, for a program that, for millions of dollars, for Jamaica and what we call the rest of the Caribbean. The rest of the Caribbean being Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda, Belize, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. So and part of that program was what we call the fiscal management program. In fact, the whole project was called Enhancing Public Financial Management in the Caribbean. So the whole idea of the project, sir, and the funds were given to the IMF, sir, to do work in the Caribbean, sir, so that we could enhance our public financial management. And that involved things like improving the treasury and debt and fiscal management, building capacity to be more efficient in our tax and our customs practices, meeting those tax reform objectives that we'd all set ourselves, sir, and overall building the capacity of the public service. And it sort of happened in Jamaica, the same thing happened in Belize, the same thing in St. Vincent, the same thing across the Caribbean. In the rest of the Caribbean, sir, specifically, we were looking at the PF, public financial management, sir, but we were also looking at the revenue administration component, how best to get taxable people to pay the taxes that were due. making the system much more efficient, sir. And I listened time and time again to the IMF as they spoke about the Caribbean. It also looks at our expenditure policy component and the need for the Caribbean to build public-private partnerships, sir, if we are to get out of this mess, sir, because we have this idea that everything that is done in the region must be done somehow by the government. And that when we sought to refashion our economies, that we had to build our economies on a new model, on a model, sir, that allowed us to sustain ourselves over time. Because the models on which we'd built the Caribbean, sir, were changing. And that we could not continue with the same practices if we were expecting to get different results. And through that project, sir, we led in Dominica and in Grenada the support for a macroeconomic specialist in both countries. And that person had the responsibility, sir, for seeing over all these things that we just discussed. We knew at that time, as we know now, that in the region, sir, you may not necessarily have all the talent that you may need to get you out of something. And we knew then, as we also know now, that sometimes you have to seek external sources, sir, to get you past a point. We also knew that the government may not be able to afford, sir, because this kind of talent does not come cheap, sir. And that when it was offered to Grenada and to Dominica, sir, they had the wherewithal and the smarts to take it, sir, because they knew they did not have the talent, nor did they have the resources to pay for it, because it cost. It costs a lot of money. And it made sense, sir, when you have to make these plans, to have people who have the skills and the technical know-how, sir, to be able to do it. My point, sir, is that many islands in the region face these circumstances. Many islands, many small island developing states, even outside of the Caribbean, face these circumstances. There is no shame. There is none in recognizing, sir, that sometimes you need help. There is no shame, sir, sometimes in recognizing that you do not have what it takes, sir, to get you past a challenging situation. There is no shame. The difference between what the other countries did and what Barbados did is that they revealed to their people the situation and they rectified it. And we concealed it, sir, and compromised Barbados and we compromised Barbadians. The former government did. So instead of dealing with the situation, they hid. And then found Barbados going deeper and deeper. There was a time, sir, where I believe with the technical skills in this government, sir, the Prime Minister herself, the Honourable Member from Christchurch, East Central, but the know-how that they have, the other members, sir, the Honourable Member for St. Michael, South Central, who sits beside me, sir, the Honourable Member for St. Peter, the persons with such technical expertise, sir, that we would have been able to maybe get ourselves out of this, but they dug us so deep and for so long that it became almost chronic, sir. To the point where even if you had a ladder, the hole was so deep that you could not climb out of it. And that while there is indeed no shame in asking for help, because the other countries in the region did, Jamaica did. Jamaica was able to turn around their economy, Grenada did. And Grenada was able to turn around their economy, sir. And those countries asked for help at a time when their debt to GDP ratio, sir, was not as dangerous as ours was. And we kept lying to well, not us, I shouldn't say we. The other government kept lying to the people over and over and over and over again, suggesting that somehow they could, through the policies that they had in the first instance initiated, and then when they needed to change course, sir, they dug deeper down into the same policies, making it more difficult, sir. So it is only natural. And, sir, all of the regional economists at the time started saying, well, Barbados needed to restructure its debt. It became a common understanding that there was a need for us to restructure our debt. We knew so, sir, when we were in opposition, sir. We did so when we came into office. So there's nothing new about what we are seeking to do. But the problem was, sir, in large degree, And because this is, to me, much more significant than Barbados and the Caribbean, sir, it is about the relationship that small island developing states, sir, have had with their colonial masters and the systems that we had built. We built these systems, sir, that were based primarily on preferential treatment. That somehow, no matter what you produce, no matter the quality of your good, that somehow somebody is going to buy it. And that you will be always preferred no matter what the circumstances. So many, many years ago, when they did not, what they call the non-renewal in Lomé Force, so when we knew that a lot of these preferential treatment things were coming to an end, we did not restructure our economies in many ways, sir. As a matter of fact, Barbados was the last bastion of hope for many of them, the last to not find its status in junk. Caribbean countries, sir, have or had a structural issue that needed somebody to be brave enough and bold enough to come and address it, sir. But to make matters worse, when we were advised many years ago for Caribbean islands to then find their revenue source, sir, from its tax system, go and, improve your financial services sector. That is the future for the region. And all of us in the region, sir, in the Caribbean, built our entire economies in a way then around the financial services sector, a significant part of it, not all. Only to find now that the same financial services sector that we were encouraged to build is also problematic. And every angle we look at, everywhere we turn, sir, the circumstances then are the same. And we now hold on to these old ways, these vestiges of the old order, sir, that no longer make sense for us. And we have to restructure it, sir. This is not a political debate, sir. We came into office, sir, through a political process, but we came to make wrong things right for people. And when we said that we needed to restructure the debt, sir, it is because we were seeking to make wrong things right for people. And I listen to the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, sir. I listen to him all the time, sir. And I understand the concern about the NAS, and I understand the concern about the central bank. But the reality is that we have to locate that issue where it really deserves to be located. Because the former government was printing money like it was nothing. It was the former government that exposed both the central bank and exposed the NAS. It was the former government, sir. And in reality, sir, I agree with the Honourable Member for St. Peter, sir, we did not raid either the NAS or the central bank, sir. We are repairing them. Yeah. Because, I used to play football. I captained my team, actually. Ooh. Yeah. I had some skills back in the day, but nonetheless, sir, when you were down on a football field, sir, you're motivating your men, you say you got to go for broke. You got to put it all on the line. You got to go for broke. But I think the Democratic Labour Party took it literally. And they went for broke. Broke the country. They broke the country. So they broke our institutions. It is the same NAS, sir, and the same central bank institutions, sir, that in this country for years were above and beyond partisan political interests, that got exposed by the same policies, sir, of the last administration when they went for broke. And it was them, sir, who raided the government. And much has been said about we've paid these consultants and we've paid White Oaks and so on, sir. But when you get $5 billion in returns for $25 million in investment, but any fool would know that is a good deal. That you brought in the technical skills, sir. And for $25 million, you were able to save $5 billion, sir. That, to me, is a sign of a very responsible government, sir. So the reverse is true. It is not that the government has been irresponsible. It is that the government has been extremely responsible. That is the truth of the government of today, sir. This Barbados Labour Party administration under the honourable member for St. Michael North East. So we have been a very responsible and disciplined government. But you know, I think about it sometimes. I've thought about it for a long time. But I think about it, sir. Sometimes I ask myself when I'm trying to explain it, I say, imagine if you take from your elderly mother the little money that she has, as they did with the central bank and the NAS. You keep taking because your mother loves you. She's going to give you all that she has. And then when your mother is unable to pay her own bills, sir, you've dragged her to the point where she now is barely able to survive in the country. But that is exactly what it is. You've raided your institution, sir, to the point it's as if a son, an indisciplined son, taking from his elderly mother to the point where she is unable to take care of herself, sir. That is what they did, sir. Institutional abuse of the elderly is what it is. And that is why I say, sir, that you cannot, in clear conscience, compare what we are doing to what the Democratic Labour Party did. I do not care how much political favor you are trying to gain, sir. It is wrong. Because this administration, sir, is performing in no way similar to the last government, sir. It is not right. Completely different motives, sir. And completely different outcomes, too. When I say that the institutions, sir, were broken, sir, the institution was broken. The government was broken. Our international reputation broken. And all of us who travel now know it. That people are happy to see Barbados back on the world stage making points. Restoring our international reputation. That is what we are doing. All of us, sir, in this room working very, very hard, sir, to repair our institutions, sir. But you know, in the very same resolution, there is a clause, sir, that finds favors with all of us. The idea, sir, that in a case where there are adverse weather conditions, that you could halt payment for 2 years. You can pause for 2 years, sir. And that is very important because in the same case that I spoke of, both in Grenada and Dominica, sir, each of whom were affected, sir, by an adverse weather event. And what did they call for from the government that I was representing at the time, sir? They called for a macroeconomic advisor because they knew that after the events of the adverse weather events, that what they needed to be able to repair their country, sir, was also somebody who could help them rebuild the economy. Because to our detriment in this house, sir, and in this country, sir, we will continue to separate that which is social, that which is of economic value, and that which is ecological, sir, for our own detriment. Because any leader now who wishes to lead this country must be able to speak on all three and lead on all three in much the same way as the Honorable Prime Minister does. Because you cannot separate it anymore. The most severe challenge facing this region, sir, has to be climate change. And that our economy is so tied to what is happening in the climate, sir. Dominica losing 400% of their GDP overnight. Bahamas, in Grand Bahama and in Abaco. And the Prime Minister made the point very well, sir, that at least in the Bahamas, I mean, God forbid that it should happen to Barbados, and God knows that we continue to pray for the Bahamas, but at least they have other islands, so that one island may be impacted and the other people may be okay on the other island. Sir, I pray for all who they still have not yet found. But in Barbados, we only have one island, sir. And that when we say that we have to build out our economy, sir, you needed, I just don't understand the logic of it. How can you oppose the idea that we needed to create for ourselves elbow room, as the Prime Minister calls it? a little fiscal space. Because you can't do anything without fiscal space. Your Honourable Member for Christchurch Essential made the point, sir, that the last government was unable to do anything much despite promising a lot because they did not have the elbow space. Nobody had the confidence in the government. The bonds that they issued was worth nothing. Everybody knew it. Many people who bought the bonds, sir, bought it knowing that it was high risk, but hoping to be able to take more from Barbados, sir, than they should have taken from Barbados in the first place. So when the government took a position, sir, on principle that the external creditors, sir, should be subject to the same conditions as the domestic creditors, sir, it was Barbadians looking out for Barbadians. That is what a responsible government does, sir. But I do not understand how anyone could try to suggest, sir, that in creating a little breathing space for ourselves, sir, taking our time, sir, to negotiate properly with the external debt creditors, sir, that we were doing something wrong. Because Barbados still has to build out its resilience, sir. And that adverse weather clause, sir, makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense because in the event that Barbados is impacted, we do not have, sir, to try to find the money to pay them while we should be trying to make sure people could eat or people could get roofs back on their houses. And there is what they call the CRIF, sir, an insurance facility in the Caribbean, but the CRIF does not pay out enough money to support any Caribbean country, sir, that has an adverse weather event. It does not. And that you needed to create that extra space for yourself. That is what the government had to do, sir. And that we are now in a position, sir, to be able to build back better. We have, sir, to be tackling, because most of our coral reef is bleaching, dead or dying, we have to be able, sir, to rebuild the coral reef, sir. We have to be able to do these revetments along the coast, sir, that would be able to steady the flow of the tide, sir, in the event that we have an adverse weather event. We have to take our environment extremely seriously, sir. Climate change is real. And any person that is of the view that climate change is not real, sir, they deceive themselves and the truth is not in them. And if we come here, sir, and we can deny, sir, the need for the government to create that space, sir, we also deny ourselves and the truth is not in us. I saw an article that said the devil is in the details. The devil is in the details, sir. When people speak, sir, we have to go behind it. If there's one thing that we must admire about this government is that we have done nothing in the dark. When we had the discussions with White Oats, it was laid in here. The conversation around our debt swap, our debt restructuring, laid in here. I'm about, sir, to bring to Cabinet, sir, and to White Barbados, the Prime Minister has spoken about it in conjunction with the Ministry of Finance, a conversation about a debt financial swap. Sir, we are in the region facing things that we've never faced. We are facing sargassum seaweed. And all across the world, sir, people are struggling to deal with it. An economy that has no breathing space cannot do those things for themselves. And that we needed to create the space, sir, to be able to do these things, sir. I knew, and I always knew, sir, we always knew that one of the first things that we said we were going to do, sir, is restructure the debt. We knew that. And we knew, sir, that we had to do it, sir, because it was, at the time, the only thing that made sense. I remember the former honorable member for St. Peter, the former Prime Minister of Barbados, sir, when he was in opposition at the time, saying that it made sense for the government then to go to the IMF and to restructure the debt instead of trying to do it on its own, because if at least you went to the IMF, you had access to the funds to be able to do things. So why starve yourself and hurt your people when you could go to the IMF, sir, with the luxury, sir, of at least having some funds to be able to do things while you try to reposition your country? There is no shame in asking for help. There is none. And so it is much more shameful, sir, to watch your country slip and slip and slip and slip away from you. Watch people suffer every day, sir. I have said before in this honorable place, sir, that I know, like myself, most Barbadians would die for a cause, but none of us seem prepared to die for folly. And what the last administration did was folly. sir, and that we now are being the most responsible that we can be, sir, in this debt restructuring. I am so pleased with the way the government has conducted itself. So I must tell you, I sat in a meeting with the Honorable Prime Minister, sir, on the other side of the table when they was having conversations with the external creditors. And the positions that the Prime Minister was taking, sir, every single one in the interest of Barbadians. Convincing, sir, to the core, and taking a position that she would not take a deal that would jeopardize the livelihoods of the people in this country. Integrity to the core. And the thing about it is, sir, that I sat in that meeting and I watched, sir, as those who were culpable, who were part of the degradation of this country, then turn around and negotiate against the same country. I was there. Those who brought us to our knees, propping up somebody else as though somebody else tried to rob the country. For 30 pieces of silver. Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, all I can say, sir, at the end of the day is that all that we have done has been extremely responsible. In a few months, maybe, when this external creditor situation is completely resolved, there is a body called the Nature Conservancy. It's an environmental body based in the US. And the Nature Conservancy is interested in doing business for Barbados, sir, for a debt for nature swap. A big part of it, sir, is where the Nature Conservancy basically buys some of your debt. And the savings that you get, sir, must go back into protecting the environment. So you reduce the level of your debt, while at the same time freeing up more elbow space to be able to put money back into the environmental pursuits that this country now needs to pursue. We are having a conversation, sir, that is sophisticated, a conversation that is mature. And I can tell you, sir, that at every corner of that conversation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are ensuring that Barbadians are protected, that the fishermen get a fair deal, that the vendors get a fair deal, sir, and that Barbados gets a fair deal at the end of the day. We have to protect the environment. We have to protect the environment. So yes, sir, we are doing a debt restructuring. But the debt restructuring gives us a little bit more space. And yes, sir, we are also making sure that there's an adverse weather clause, because if something should happen in the process of restructuring your debt, sir, you need that little bit of breathing space. And we are pursuing other ends that will bring advantage to the country, sir. So that when you analyze it, when you look at it into its component parts, everything that we're doing, both in terms of its parts, sir, and its whole, is only to serve the country. And all that we are doing, sir, is to reinforce, sir, in the minds of Barbadians, sir, that when they went to the polls and they elected us as the government, sir, that they were making a good choice. All of us, sir. All of us. And that when we present ourselves to the public again in another few years, we will say, here we are, your humble and faithful servants.
Well done.
Well done. Well done, my good and faithful servant.
Member, you have 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I am almost done.
Short speech.
Yeah, this is one of my shorter ones. Mr. Speaker, sir, I feel, and I felt this was more of a moment, sir, because I spent a long time at the university teaching. This was more of a teaching moment, sir, than it was a political moment. Because I feel, sir, that when it comes now to where Barbados must go, there's very little space for political posturing. And that sometimes, sir, we have to face the reality of that which is before us. And that we were faced, sir, with options, the Democratic Labour Party government, sir, and this Barbados Labour Party government. It's just chalk and cheese. It's really chalk and cheese. Now, if a person disagrees with our methods, sir, let us have an intelligent conversation around the methods. and that perhaps we can enlighten, sir, those who are not enlightened about what it is that we're doing and why. But not everything, sir, has to be about political posturing. And I feel, sir, that this debt restructuring, sir, the way we've done it, sir, is going to be good for the country. I respect the position, sir, that we took in relation to the external debt creditors, sir. I am proud, sir, of the way the government has conducted itself and its business. I am satisfied that both the honourable leader of this country and the honourable member for Christchurch East Central have done well by and for Barbados, sir. And all I can do, sir, as I close, is support this resolution, sir, with all that I have. I thank you, sir, for your time.
Member for Sir Michael West.
Let me thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I really do enjoy, notwithstanding what some people might think, the contributions rendered now on a weekly basis from the honourable member who last sat and the honourable member who spoke before him, respectively, honourable members for St. Michael South and St. Peter. I can appreciate the spirit of competition, and I applaud the honourable member of St. Michael South for so well and eloquently putting his credentials on the table just now before this House and the public of Barbados. And that does not escape me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that you have two bright young men with honest hearts, aspiring both to the leadership of the administration over there when the moment comes. And weekly now, they each try to outdo each other.
You're raising a point of order? Yeah.
I never like to interrupt the honourable leader of the opposition, but to suggest, not even to suggest, sir, but to state so boldly that any such aspiration exists either in myself or the honourable member for St. Peter, sir, is definitely misleading the House. There is no vacancy on this side. No. And the person who holds the job, sir, we all support with full support, sir.
Thank you.
So I would like to make that a point of order.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me make myself quite clear. I was not suggesting that there's any vacancy in leadership on the other side. There obviously is not. In fact, this weekend's events suggest very clearly that the leadership is reinforcing its own position. So there's no threat or challenge or any suspicion that there's any vacancy attaching to the leadership over there. I was just simply applauding two very intelligent young men for their presentations in this House and seeking simply to highlight my sense and observation that they're both putting forward their credentials to accede to the leadership of that organization when the moment does come. That is all I'm saying, and they're to be applauded for that. And while I am on that, I may very well applaud the honourable member of St. James Central, who very quietly sits in this House these days, but very studiously, apparently, and in a very diligent and disciplined manner, is pursuing his portfolio responsibilities. And that is his way of staking his claim when the moment does come. And so I applaud him as well. Many. And that is a good thing, insofar as we have been told quite recently that there is a dearth, potentially, of leadership should the administration of the day fail in its undertakings to rescue Barbados. So I am simply applauding my two honourable friends to my extreme left. I admire both of them to a significant degree. And I simply challenge you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that when next they both stand to speak, listen very clearly, and you will see them putting their credentials. For one must learn to speak not only of social matters, but on economic matters if one aspires to lead this country. And so you speak with eloquence on economic matters and establish your credentials. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is the way it is done. Now, Mr. Speaker, to the immediate business at hand. You see, the other side of the story must be put. And it is my role to try as best as I can to put the other side, or to at least speak to the fuller truth. Speak to the fuller truth and put the other side and ask the probing questions and point to the serious concerns that some of us still have as Barbadians, notwithstanding government's loud applause of its own efforts. Now, Mr. Speaker, they boast under these arrangements, and I'm sorry, the honourable member for Christchurch East Central is not in his position at this moment. They boast, I'm not suggesting anything by that, I'm genuinely sorry he's not there to hear. That's all. There are good reasons why people have to leave the chamber from time to time, and I'm sure he is diligent about whatever business he has at hand, because I see him as one who's very hardworking in the ministry assigned to him. And I would say that, I've said it to him privately, and I will repeat it publicly. He is very hardworking. Does not mean I agree with every policy initiative that he champions here, but he seems to be very hardworking, and he puts the government's case as clearly as he's able to do. But I'm simply saying, Mr. Speaker, there is always a fuller truth. There is always a fuller truth that has to be said and spoken. We boast of a 26% haircut on our external debt. A savings of 26%, a shaving of 26.4%, is it? 26.3%, I think it is, on our external debt, which I think is about, or was about $2.4 billion. 26%. The honourable member for Christchurch East Central, when he spoke, referred to countries like Greece and Argentina. Do you know what the level of the haircut was that Greece was able to negotiate with its external creditors, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Not 26%, not 36%, not 46%, but 50%. A better deal than Barbados. The point has to be made that though we are glad that we have arrived at a seeming settlement of our external debt situation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the point has to be made that though we can get on now with the business, having restructured domestically before, though we can now get on with the business of trying to right the ship of this economy, the fact of the matter is we're happy about a deal, but we cannot be overly glowing in our plaudits for the government when certain things are taken into consideration. So when we boast of a 26% shave, fine. But Greece, Mr. Deputy Speaker, got a 50% haircut deal, better than Barbados. Argentina, Mr. Deputy Speaker, got not 26%, nor 36, nor 46, nor 56, nor 66% haircut. Mr. Deputy, got 70% haircut. So we have to ask ourselves, did we get the best deal possible, or did we have to settle in the given circumstances for what we got? Now that is a legitimate question being asked.
On a point of,
I think the honourable member is misleading the House from the perspective that to compare firstly Greece and Greece's approach to restructuring to Barbados is not to compare apples and apples. Because Greece first is a member of the EU and benefits from substantial technical assistance that is provided out of Brussels to help a country which is significantly larger than our own. So we're not comparing the same things. And then to speak to Argentina, and that is really, I think, what prompted me to get up, because Argentina's debt situation is known worldwide for its disorderly nature. And we would not have wanted to go there, one, but Argentina is a much larger economy. So the size of the economy gives a country, a leverage that a much smaller economy will not have. So I don't want the honorable member to mislead the chamber by suggesting that there is some equivalence between a Greece, Argentina on the one hand, and a Barbados.
Okay.
We don't have the same leverage, so I think he's misleading the chamber.
Thank you. Continue.
And as I suggested at the outset, Mr. Deputy Speaker, through the forum, the honorable member for St. Peter speaks, and he speaks intelligently. But the person who introduced the comparison into this debate was the person who presented this measure here this morning in the first place, the honorable member for Christchurch East Central, and he referred to countries like Greece. And I hear the honorable member for St. Peter about the advantageous position of Greece within the European Union and stuff like that. But that strengthens my point, that despite the advantages which they have within that context, yet they were able to get a higher, a larger, a bigger discount on the debt than we got. They got 50%, Mr. Speaker, we got 26%. And if honorable members to my left wanted to speak to the fuller truth, they could have put the 26% that we got in context, in perspective, by making some of these references. They did not do that. They're doing it now in response to what I am saying. And all I'm trying to do is to give a broader perspective on what has been presented to us by them. And I think you understand that, Mr. Speaker, because we're speaking the fuller truth. Nobody is saying that the government is seeking to mislead the country or is bringing falsehood to the country. We are simply saying, if you're going to speak to these things, especially if you're going to applaud yourself, speak to the fuller truth. Greece got 50, Argentina got 70%, despite the disorderly nature of their restructuring efforts. And you know, the honorable member in his lead presentation referenced other countries too, like Jamaica and Grenada and so forth in relation to IMF program. And we can spend some time going to talk about Jamaica and its stresses and the travail it went through under an IMF program not as austere as ours is, but we will leave that at that point for now. All we're saying is, yeah, 26% haircut on $2.4 billion. We're happy for that, but others got better deals where we, in fact, pressured into accepting that 26. Now, the honorable member for St. Peter, I think it was, made reference to the interest savings, and that is fine. We're happy about interest savings, but tell us how much interest yet we have to pay, because that is the fuller truth. And Barbadians need to hear, want to know. What is the level of interest we will have to pay going forward? Don't just say we've made a savings of X or Y amount. What do we have to pay going forward? And not in vague and broad macro terms. Tell them in terms of dollars so that Bajans can know how it impacts them. We're talking about fuller truth, full disclosure. Mr. Speaker, with respect to interest payments, in short order, Mr. Speaker, we have to pay about $4 million relative to interest owed to our creditors. These are the upcoming immediate payments, starting and completed 2 payments in 2020. There are also, Mr. Speaker, a number of other interest payments which will have to be paid between 2021 and 2029, amounting to $356 million. Talk to the people in numbers that may be understood. so that Bajans would know exactly what we have agreed to and what are the implications for us going forward. So interest payments going down till 2029, beginning in April, I think it is 2021, $356 million, Mr. Speaker. Total interest payments, therefore, between April of next year and down to 2029, $360 million in interest payments. Those are the numbers. Now, in terms of repayment on principal under the new arrangements spoken to in the resolution, beginning in 2025 and going through to 2029, $547 million that we have to look to pay. 2 in 2025, 2 in 2026, 2 in 2027, 2 in 2028, 2 in 2029, each of about $55 million each payment. Mr. Deputy Speaker, those are some of the numbers. There's an immediate payment, almost immediate, in fact it is upon us, of $32.5 million, making a total of principal repayments falling to us between now and 2029 of $580 million. When you add the two together, the principal amounts and the interest, Mr. Speaker, between now with the immediate payments facing us and those starting significantly in 2025 and going through twice per year to 2099, we're talking about $940 million US, $1.8 billion, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And these are the numbers with which we have to be familiar, because that is the burden of debt that will fall according to schedule under this agreement upon the shoulders of the people of Barbados. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have been given a 10-year period of maturity on these bonds that will be issued under the new arrangement from now to 2029. Now, if the fuller truth is heard, voices would be heard to admit that insofar as the external credit arrangements are concerned under this particular arrangement cited in the resolution before us, that the external creditors would seem to be taking a risk reduction approach to their agreeing with the position of the Barbados government. That is the approach you take. You reduce your risk, especially if you have been bitten once before, then you become twice shy. So you have to say to the people of Barbados, we were able to get only a 10-year period of maturity on our external bonds, external debt. It speaks to an unwillingness on the part of the creditors to hold out with Barbados. I'll put that in a better context, a broader context for you in a minute, because that is what it is suggesting. Some would say an agreement in 17 months is fast, and it speaks to confidence on the part of the external creditors in the Barbadian economy. Some would suggest, since you were given such a short period with respect to the maturity of these bonds, it speaks to a lack of confidence, a lack of significant confidence in the Barbados economy. Do you recall, Mr. Speaker, that local creditors were given 15-year bonds, period of maturity, 15 years? 15 years. Because the Barbados government is in a position to pressure local creditors to accept that. You can't get past, apparently, external creditors with that. So you have a very short payback time. Many of these instances, Mr. Speaker, run into 15, 20, 25, 30 years. We have 10 short years. 10 short years, Mr. Speaker. And
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the honourable member continues. I don't want to say he's demonstrating a lack of understanding. I think he's just being political. And I can understand that because we're all politicians. The constant reference to the 10 short years, I think, misleads the chamber and misleads the public. We've set ourselves as a government certain benchmarks to reach. And we know when we want to reach a debt to GDP ratio of 60%. The timeline that we've negotiated and agreed with the external creditors and the committee allows us to reach the targets that we set for ourselves in the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to constantly harp on 10 short years is to mislead the chamber into believing that those 10 years will stop us or will hinder our progress in reaching the target that we set for ourselves and that the IMF agreed with us on with the extended fund facility.
Well, continue, member.
we're getting there, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We're getting there. And the honourable member for St. Peter, I think, is establishing some distance between himself and he who runs behind him at the moment. We're getting there. Getting there, Mr. Speaker. Now, you see, in this debate, Mr. Deputy Speaker, all I'm saying is that the fuller truth, the fuller revelation has to be made. You don't come and say, I got a quick agreement in 17 months, when normally it would take 2 years and more. You don't come and say, this is